The customer comes in, if he's been coming into this store for 50 or 75 years, some of them, it doesn't look like it's changed to them.
Picture this. An 82-year-old man sits in the same barber chair where he spent decades cutting hair. His hands shake slightly as he wipes away tears, finally ready to tell a story he's kept secret for over 30 years. For 3 decades, Adrian Wood was the only person Donald Trump trusted with his most famous feature: his hair. Now, after years of staying silent through scandals, elections, and endless speculation, this elderly barber is finally breaking down and revealing everything. What made him cry wasn't hatred or anger. It was something much more complicated. A mixture of loyalty, disappointment, and secrets that have weighed on his heart for years. The man who knew Donald Trump before he became president, before he became a household name, before the world started asking questions about everything from his business deals to his hair, is finally ready to speak. This isn't just about haircuts or celebrity gossip. This is about a relationship that lasted longer than some marriages, built on trust and routine, but tested by fame and controversy. What Adrian Wood reveals will surprise you, touch your heart, and maybe change how you think about the man who became the most powerful person in America. Adrian Wood's story begins far from the glittering towers of Manhattan, in a small town, in England, where he first learned to cut hair as a teenager. Born in 1941, he grew up during World War II, watching his father work as a traditional barber in their neighborhood shop. Even as a young boy, Adrian was fascinated by the precision required to give someone the perfect haircut. He would watch his father's steady hands move the scissors with surgical accuracy, creating styles that made ordinary people feel special. By the time he was 16, Adrian knew exactly what he wanted to do with his life. While other boys his age were thinking about factory work or joining the military, he was practicing on anyone who would let him near their head with a pair of scissors. His friends, his family, even the neighbor's dog. Adrian was always looking for ways to perfect his craft. In the early 1970s, at the age of 30, Adrian made one of the boldest decisions of his life. He packed everything he owned into 2 suitcases and moved to New York City, a place where dreams came true, but also where they could be crushed in an instant. He had heard about a legendary barbershop called Pall Mall, founded way back in 1913, that served some of the richest and most powerful people in the city. When Adrian first walked into Pall Mall barbershop, located on the fancy Upper East Side of Manhattan, he felt like he was stepping into history. The shop had leather chairs that had been there for decades, antique mirrors that reflected the faces of countless famous customers, and the rich smell of expensive cologne and shaving, cream that seemed to be permanently soaked into the walls. Pall Mall wasn't just any barbershop. It was the kind of place where Wall Street millionaires came to look their best, where famous actors got their hair cut before major movie premieres, and where politicians came to make sure they looked presidential. Adrian knew that if he could prove himself in this shop, he would be working at the very top of his profession. The 1970s and 1980s were an exciting time to be a barber in New York City. Fashion was changing rapidly, with people experimenting with all kinds of wild hairstyles. But Pall Mall stayed true to its traditional roots, focusing on classic, timeless cuts that would make a man look sophisticated and successful no matter what year it was. Adrian quickly earned a reputation as someone who could take a client's natural features and create a haircut that made them look like the best possible version of themselves. He wasn't interested in following every new trend that came along. Instead, he mastered the art of making each person look distinguished and confident. It was during this time, in the late 1970s, that a young real estate developer named Donald Trump first walked through the doors of Pall Mall barbershop. Trump was in his early 30s, ambitious and determined to make a name for himself in New York's competitive business world. Even then, before he became famous, there was something different about him, an energy and confidence that filled the room. From their very first meeting, Trump made one thing crystal clear to Adrian: you can cut around the edges, but never, ever touch the top of my head. That's my territory, and nobody else's. Adrian had worked with demanding clients before, But Trump's instructions were more specific than anything he had ever heard. It wasn't just about getting a good haircut. It was about maintaining complete control over his image. Trump's hair, even back in the 1970s, was carefully constructed to look as full and impressive as possible. Adrian quickly realized that this wasn't vanity. It was strategy. Trump understood that in business, appearance could be just as important as talent or intelligence. People made judgments about your success and power based on how you looked, and Trump wasn't going to leave anything to chance. Over the months and years that followed, Adrian watched Trump's career explode. He went from being just another real non-estate developer to one of the most recognizable names in New York City. He built Trump Tower, one of the most famous buildings in Manhattan. He appeared on magazine covers and television shows. He wrote books about making deals and getting rich. Through it all, he kept coming back to Adrian's chair, always with the same specific instructions about his hair. Adrian began to understand that Trump's hairstyle wasn't just about looking good. It was about creating a brand, an image that would be instantly recognizable anywhere in the world. While other successful businessmen changed their hairstyles with fashion trends, Trump kept his exactly the same, year after year, decade after decade. The relationship between Adrian and Trump grew beyond just barber and client. Trump would talk about his business deals, his plans for new buildings, his dreams of expanding his empire beyond real estate. Adrian became someone Trump could trust with his thoughts and ideas, partly because he knew Adrian wasn't interested in selling stories to newspapers or gossiping about his famous clients. During one particularly difficult time in the late 1980s, Adrian's barbershop faced a crisis that could have ended everything. Rent prices on the Upper East Side were skyrocketing, and Paul Mole couldn't afford to keep paying for their ground floor location. Adrian was devastated, thinking he might have to close the shop that had been his life's work, when Trump came. In for his regular haircut, and Adrian explained the situation. Trump's response was immediate and practical. "Move the shop to the second floor," he said. "The rent will be much cheaper, and people will still come because of your reputation." It seemed like such a simple solution, but Adrian had been too worried to think clearly. Following Trump's advice saved the barber shop. Moving to the second floor reduced their expenses dramatically, and their loyal customers followed them upstairs without complaint. Adrian later said that Trump's business sense had literally saved his livelihood, and he never forgot that kindness. As the years went by, Adrian got to see sides of Trump that the public never knew existed. Yes, he was demanding and specific about his appearance, but he also showed genuine concern for Adrian's business and personal life. When Adrian's wife got sick, Trump asked about her health every time he came in. When Adrian was thinking about retirement, Trump encouraged him to keep working as long as he enjoyed it. But Adrian also witnessed Trump's transformation from a New York businessman into a global celebrity, and eventually into one of the most controversial political figures in American history. He watched as Trump became the star of The Apprentice, a reality TV show that made him even more famous. He saw him run for president and win, becoming the most powerful person in America. Through all of these changes, Trump's hair routine never varied. Every few weeks, he would sit in Adrian's chair, and Adrian would carefully trim around the edges while Trump styled the top himself, using a specific routine that he had perfected over decades. Adrian learned to work around Trump's methods, supporting his self-styling while making sure the overall look appeared professional and well-groomed. Adrian also had to deal with the constant speculation about Trump's hair. People asked if it was real, if it was a wig, if Trump had hair transplants or other surgical procedures. Reporters tried to get Adrian to reveal secrets about his famous client. But Adrian never broke his professional code of silence, even when he could have made money selling stories to tabloid newspapers. The emotional weight of keeping these secrets for so long is part of what finally made Adrian cry when he decided to speak publicly. For over 30 years, he had listened to wild theories and cruel jokes about Trump's appearance, knowing the truth but unable to defend his client without betraying professional confidence. During Trump's presidency, the pressure on Adrian became even more intense. Every time Trump appeared on television or at a public event, people would analyze his hair, looking for clues about whether it was real or fake. Adrian watched these discussions, knowing that he was probably the only person outside Trump's immediate family who knew the complete truth. The stress of keeping professional secrets while watching public speculation wasn't the only thing weighing on Adrian's mind. As Trump became more politically controversial, Adrian found himself in an uncomfortable position. He had known Trump as a client, and in some ways, as a friend for decades. But he also watched as Trump made decisions and statements. As president, The breaking point came during the final months of Trump's presidency, around the events of January 6, 2021, when protesters stormed the U.S. Capitol building. Adrian, like millions of Americans, watched the shocking scenes on television, and he couldn't help but think about the man he had known for so many years. How had the ambitious young businessman he had met in the 1970s become involved in such a controversial and divisive situation? It was then that Adrian realized he couldn't keep his thoughts and feelings bottled up any longer. At 82 years old, he felt a responsibility to share his perspective, not to attack or defend Trump, but to provide a more complete picture of a man who had been such a significant part of his life. When Adrian finally decided to break his silence, the emotions overwhelmed him almost immediately. Sitting in the same chair where he had cut hair for decades, surrounded by the same mirrors and tools he had used to serve his famous clients, he began to cry as he started telling his story. The tears weren't from anger or hatred. They came from a complex mixture of feelings that he had been carrying for years. There was sadness about watching someone he had known become such a divisive figure. There was guilt about staying silent for so long when he could have provided context to public discussions. There was grief for the simpler times when his biggest concern was giving someone a perfect haircut. People think they know everything about Donald Trump from what they see on TV or read in newspapers, Adrian said through his tears. But I knew him before all of that. I knew him when he was just a young man trying to build something impressive in New York City. I saw his determination, his work ethic, his loyalty to people who helped him. Adrian revealed that Trump's hair care routine was indeed intensive and specific, but not for the reasons people assumed. It wasn't vanity, Adrian explained. It was about control and consistency. Trump understood that his appearance was part of his business success, and he wasn't going to let anything about it be left to chance. The truth about Trump's hair, according to Adrian, is much simpler than the wild theories people have created. It's completely real, Adrian said firmly. No wigs, no fake pieces, no major surgical procedures. Just a very specific styling routine that Trump has perfected over decades, combined with prescription medication to slow hair loss. Adrian explained that Trump takes Propecia, a medication that helps prevent male pattern baldness, which his doctor had confirmed publicly in 2017. The medication, combined with careful styling and high-quality hair products, creates the distinctive look that has become Trump's trademark. The reason people think it might be fake is because it's so different from normal hair, Adrian explained. Trump's hair is naturally fine and thin, which means it can look completely different depending on lighting, humidity, and how it's styled on any given day. But it's all his own hair. The styling process, according to Adrian, is something Trump handles himself. I would cut around the edges, clean up the back and sides, but the top was always off limits. Trump would spend considerable time after each haircut arranging and styling the top portion himself, using specific products and techniques that he had developed over many years. Adrian also revealed insights into Trump's personality that the ETS public rarely saw. He could be incredibly demanding about his appearance, yes, but he was also generous and loyal to people who worked for him. When my shop was struggling financially, he gave me business advice that saved it. When my wife was sick, he always asked about her health. He remembered personal details about my life that other clients never bothered with. But Adrian also acknowledged the more difficult aspects of Trump's personality that became more prominent as his fame grew. Over the years, I watched him become more focused on his image and reputation. The criticism and attacks that came with being famous seemed to make Him more defensive and more concerned about controlling how people saw him. The most emotional part of Adrian's revelation came when he talked about watching Trump's political career. "I never imagined that the young businessman I met in the 1970s would become president," Adrian said. "And I certainly never imagined that he would become such a controversial figure. It's heartbreaking to see someone you've known for so long become the center of so much anger and division." Adrian was careful to emphasize that he wasn't taking political sides by speaking out. "I'm not here to tell people whether Trump was a good president or a bad president. That's for voters and historians to decide. I'm just sharing my perspective as someone who knew him personally for a very long time." The barber also addressed the broader impact of his long silence. "I sometimes wonder if I should have spoken up sooner," he said. "Maybe if people had heard more personal stories about Trump, both positive and negative, it would have led to more thoughtful discussions instead of just arguments and name-calling." Adrian's decision to finally speak publicly wasn't just about Trump. It was also about his own legacy and the values he had tried to maintain throughout his career. "I've always believed that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their politics or fame. But I also believe that truth matters, and staying silent when you have relevant information isn't always the right choice." The 82-year-old barber also reflected on the broader changes he had witnessed in American society during his decades of cutting hair for famous clients. "When I started at Pall Mall in the 1970s, people with different political views could still be friends and have civil conversations. I watched that change over the years, and it makes me sad." As Adrian finished telling his story, he made it clear that his decision to speak out wasn't motivated by money or fame. "I'm 82 years old," he said. "I don't need money, and I don't want to be famous. I just felt like I had a responsibility to share what I know, especially since there's been so much speculation and misinformation." The barber also expressed hope that his story might encourage more thoughtful discussions about public figures and the complexities of human nature. "Everyone is more complicated than they appear in headlines or on television," Adrian said, "Trump included. He's done things I disagree with and things I admire. Most people are like that if you know them long enough and well enough." Adrian's revelations provide a unique perspective on one of the most famous and controversial figures in modern American history. His story reminds us that behind every public figure is a real person with relationships, habits, and personal qualities that don't always make it into news reports or political discussions. The elderly barber's tears weren't just about Trump or politics. They represented the weight of carrying secrets for decades, the sadness of watching relationships change, and the complexity of trying to be loyal to a person while also being honest with the public. In a world where everything seems to be either completely good or completely bad, Adrian's story offers a more nuanced view of human nature and the relationships that shape our lives. As Adrian concluded his emotional revelation, he emphasized one final point that seemed to capture the essence of his entire story. "I spent 30 years cutting Donald Trump's hair, and in all that time, the one thing that never changed was his routine. Same specific instructions, same careful attention to detail, same determination to control every aspect of his appearance. That consistency, for better or worse, is what I'll remember most about him." The 82-year-old barber's decision to finally break his silence offers us a reminder that every public figure, no matter how famous or controversial, is also a private person with relationships and personal qualities that exist beyond their public image. Adrian Wood's story doesn't ask us to love or hate Donald Trump. Instead, it asks us to remember that the truth is usually more complicated than the headlines suggest, and that understanding comes from listening to people who actually knew the person behind the public persona. If this incredible story of loyalty, secrets, and the complexity of human relationships moved you, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear about the importance of seeing beyond headlines to understand the real people behind public figures. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification. Bell so you never miss our deep dives into the untold stories that help us understand the world around us. Because sometimes the most important truths come from the people who were there, watching quietly, keeping secrets, and finally finding the courage to share what they know.